Hollywood icon who has starred in some of the biggest blockbuster films for 5 decades.
Yeah, Faye Dunaway grabbed our attention in Bonnie and Clyde and went on to such classics as Chinatown.
Well, that it's a faith story. I became aware of this genre, maybe a year or two ago, and I told my agent to look out for projects that I could do because, and so it's kind of bittersweet. You win and you win, and yet there are.
For decades, Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford represented the golden image of Hollywood glamour. Two luminous stars whose on-screen chemistry burned brighter than most real romances. From Bonnie and Clyde to The Great Gatsby and beyond, Dunaway became one of cinema's most captivating women, while Redford was the man every actor wanted to be, charming, intelligent, and magnetic. But behind the lights, the laughter, and the carefully crafted smiles lay a story neither spoke of. Until now. At 84, Faye Dunaway has finally opened up about what really happened between her and Robert Redford, and what he did that changed her forever. Her confession wasn't bitter, nor was it sensational. It was raw, reflective, and heartbreaking, the kind of truth that only time and distance can reveal. The world saw two perfect stars, flawless, elegant, and untouchable. What it didn't see were the fragile hearts beneath the surface. Their story isn't just about romance or rivalry. It's about power, silence, regret, and forgiveness. Dunaway's revelation peeled back the glamorous curtain of 1970s Hollywood, exposing the human vulnerability hidden behind two legendary faces. After years of speculation, she finally broke her silence, and her words left even Robert Redford's closest friends stunned. What he did wasn't scandalous. It was something deeper, something that revealed the very soul of a man shaped by ambition and a woman haunted by what could have been. And when she finally spoke, the entire world listened. It was the late 1960s, a time when Hollywood shimmered with rebellious energy and a new kind of stardom was being born. The golden age was giving way to something more daring, more human, and at the center of it all stood two rising forces destined to cross paths: Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford. Faye was fresh off the thunderous success of Bonnie and Clyde, a performance that shattered expectations and redefined the role of women in film. She was radiant, sharp, and unafraid to show the cracks in her characters. Redford, on the other hand, was the embodiment of quiet charisma, a man whose every glance seemed to carry meaning. When they finally met, sparks didn't just fly, they collided like lightning. Their first meeting was on a studio lot, during the casting discussions for a film that never got made. Dunaway later recalled that moment vividly. He had this calm confidence that filled the room. I didn't know whether to admire it or fear it. Redford, years later, would describe her as a hurricane in heels, elegant but unpredictable. They were opposites in almost every sense. Faye was intense, deeply emotional, and drawn to the complexity of human behavior. Redford was controlled, thoughtful, and guarded, a man who measured every word. Yet that difference only deepened their connection. Directors noticed it immediately. Their chemistry was undeniable. When they shared a screen, the tension between them didn't feel rehearsed. It felt lived. Hollywood adored them together. They represented the perfect balance of fire and ice, her passion against his poise. Behind the scenes, though, the story was far less polished. Redford admired Faye's talent, but he often found her unpredictability exhausting. She, in turn, found his calmness infuriating, as if he refused to ever let her in completely. Still, there was something magnetic between them. Late-night rehearsals turned into long conversations about fame, art, and the loneliness of being admired by millions but understood by no one. Faye once said in an old interview, "We were both searching for truth, in our work, in ourselves." Maybe that's why we were drawn together. But truth has a cost. Rumors began to swirl. Tabloids hinted at a quiet romance, though neither ever confirmed it. Redford was known for keeping his private life fiercely protected, while Faye's intensity made any relationship a storm. Yet those who worked with them could see it. The glances, the silences, the unspoken electricity that lingered even when the cameras stopped rolling. For a while, they became each other's mirror. Faye saw in Robert the steadiness she longed for, and Robert saw in Faye the raw vulnerability he tried to hide. But as quickly as they connected, cracks began to form. Their careers were exploding, and the fame that brought them together soon began to pull them apart. By the early 1970s, both were global icons, appearing on magazine covers, winning awards, and being courted by every major director in Hollywood. Yet, beneath that glittering surface, there remained something unresolved, a quiet tension that neither could name aloud. Faye once described it simply. He taught me something about restraint, and I taught him something about chaos. Maybe that's what we were meant to do for each other. Collide, and then drift away. It was only the beginning of a connection that would haunt them for decades, and one that Faye Dunaway, at 84, would finally speak about with a mix of sorrow, nostalgia, and truth. By the early 1970s, Hollywood had claimed both Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford as royalty. Every producer wanted them. Every director dreamed of pairing them. When the two were cast together in a major studio project, a romantic drama that demanded deep emotional connection, the set became a powder keg of energy. Everyone sensed it. The chemistry was real, but so were the undercurrents. Faye was known for her intensity, her ability to dissolve into a character until she became someone else entirely. Redford, in contrast, was composed, a master of subtlety and restraint. That difference, which once drew them together, soon became a battlefield. Faye's approach was raw and emotional. Redford's was measured, almost detached. The result was magic on screen and chaos behind it. Crew members recalled heated creative debates between the two. Faye wanted truth in every glance, every gesture. Redford wanted precision. She wanted the scene to bleed, one cameraman later said, and he wanted it to breathe. The director loved it. The tension gave the film a heartbeat. But for Faye, the emotional push and pull went beyond acting. She began to feel that Robert was pulling away, emotionally guarded, never fully letting her inside the man behind the mask. Then came the moment she would never forget. During a late-night reshoot, after hours of retakes, exhaustion broke her composure. Faye stumbled through a line and froze, visibly shaken. The set fell silent. Most actors would have brushed it off, but not Redford. He walked up to her quietly without a word and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect," he whispered. That simple line cut through her like glass. In that instant, Faye realized how deeply she'd been chasing perfection, in her craft, her image, her very being. Redford had seen through it, through her, in a way no one ever had. That night, she later confessed, was when she began to see the man behind the legend, but the tenderness didn't last. The following days brought distance. Redford retreated into himself, avoiding personal talks, sticking to the work. Faye, on the other hand, grew frustrated. She wanted connection, something beyond the script. But Robert, always cautious, always protecting his privacy, refused to give her that vulnerability again. He knew how to turn it on and off, she would say decades later. That's what made him brilliant. But it also broke something in me. Hollywood began whispering. Some called it passion. Others said it was ego. The truth was neither. It was hurt. Faye was an artist who lived from the heart. Robert was a man who survived by guarding his. The collision of those two forces left scars that no camera could capture. When filming wrapped, they parted quietly. No grand goodbye, no closure, just silence. Faye later admitted that she expected him to call, to reach out. He never did. Redford, true to form, moved on to his next project, burying himself in work, while Faye carried the emotional aftermath alone. But what he didn't know, what he didn't realize he had done, was leave her with a truth that would follow her for decades. That single moment, his gentle words in the middle of her breakdown, made her see herself differently. For the first time, she recognized that her strength came not from perfection, but from vulnerability. Years later, when she spoke of that moment, her voice trembled. "He didn't break my heart," she said softly. He opened it, and though they would rarely cross paths again, that quiet act, that human kindness, wrapped in restraint, became one of the defining moments of Faye Dunaway's life. When the cameras stopped rolling, Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford returned to their separate worlds, two stars shining on different sides of the same Hollywood sky. But something unspoken lingered between them, something neither fame nor time could erase. Faye went on to conquer the 1970s with unforgettable performances in Chinatown and Network, films that cemented her as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. Critics called her fearless, electric, and dangerously human. But beneath the acclaim, she often found herself haunted by a sense of emptiness she couldn't explain. Friends would later say that whenever Robert Redford's name came up, her eyes softened, not with anger or longing, but with quiet understanding. Redford, meanwhile, was building a different kind of legacy. His roles in The Way We Were and All the President's Men made him one of Hollywood's most bankable and respected stars. Yet for all his success, he carried a solitude that was almost palpable. He preferred mountains to red carpets, truth to gossip. He became the face of thoughtful masculinity, the man who could charm the world but never fully belonged to it. Behind that composed exterior, though, there were moments of reflection, fleeting, private thoughts about the woman whose fire had once challenged him. A journalist who interviewed him years later recalled how Redford paused when asked about Dunaway. "She was extraordinary," he said simply. "Intense, unpredictable, but real." The two never spoke publicly about what happened between them, but insiders said that Redford once tried to reach out, not with a phone call, but with a gesture. During the production of 3 Days of the Condor, a film about mistrust and connection, he reportedly suggested Faye for a leading role. The studio declined, fearing their chemistry might overpower the story. That unspoken attempt was his way of saying what words never could, that he hadn't forgotten. Faye, however, moved deeper into her craft. Acting had always been her refuge, a place where she could pour her emotions when real life became too heavy. But the more she gave to her characters, the less she seemed to have left for herself. "I think I lived my life on film," she once admitted, and forgot to live it in between. In interviews, she often described Redford not as a lost love, but as a mirror, someone who reflected back the truth she didn't want to face. "He made me see my own ambition," she confessed. "He made me realize how much I feared being seen for who I really was." By the 1980s, both had transformed, Faye into a complex, sometimes misunderstood icon, and Robert into an artist philanthropist reshaping the industry through Sundance. Yet their paths, though parallel, never crossed again in any meaningful way. Hollywood had moved on, but memory has its own gravity. Redford reportedly once attended a private screening of Barfly, one of Dunaway's most personal performances. Those who were there said he sat in silence long after the credits rolled. "She still has it," he murmured, the same quiet admiration that once defined their connection. Time turned their story into legend, but the truth was far simpler. Two artists who met at the wrong moment, each too proud, too passionate, too human to say what they really felt. Years later, when asked if she regretted anything about her early career, Faye smiled faintly and said, "Only that sometimes I didn't know the difference between the performance and the person. And perhaps that was the tragedy. That in a world built on pretending, the one person who made her feel real was the one she could never truly have." At 84, Faye Dunaway sat in a softly lit room overlooking Los Angeles, the same city that had given her everything and taken just as much away. The interview was meant to be a simple retrospective, another look back at a legendary career. But as the cameras rolled, Faye surprised everyone. Her voice was quieter than it used to be, her words slower, more deliberate. And then, almost as if speaking to herself, she finally said it. "Robert Redford did something for me that no one else in Hollywood ever did. He saw me. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't romance. It was recognition." Faye explained that Redford's quiet kindness, that one moment years ago when she broke down on set, had stayed with her for a lifetime. He hadn't judged her, hadn't tried to fix her. He had simply seen her in a moment of imperfection and made her feel human again. "For a woman like me," she said softly. That meant everything. In that confession lay decades of silence, of what-ifs and unfinished stories. Redford, known for his privacy, never responded publicly to her words. But those who knew him said he had already heard, and that it moved him deeply. One close friend revealed, he always respected Faye. He said she carried both brilliance and burden, and that he hoped she found peace. Faye's reflection wasn't filled with regret. There was no bitterness in her tone, only gratitude. "I think," she said, pausing, "he taught me that love doesn't always come wrapped in romance. Sometimes it's a single act of understanding that stays with you forever." She spoke of how that moment, his hand on her shoulder, his quiet reassurance, changed the way she approached everything after. It made her gentler with others, and eventually gentler with herself. For an actress who had spent her life demanding perfection, Redford's words had unlocked something she didn't know she needed: permission to be human. As the years passed, their lives continued on separate paths. Two legends, bound not by scandal but by a shared truth. When she spoke of him in that final interview, her eyes glimmered with both nostalgia and peace. "He reminded me," she said, "that behind every mask, even in Hollywood, there's just a person trying to do their best." That was her revelation, the truth that the world had been waiting for. Not a hidden affair or a betrayal, but something infinitely more powerful: an act of grace. When the interview ended, Faye sat for a long time in silence, looking out over the city. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky gold, the same color that once framed their faces on screen. And in that quiet light, you could almost feel that somewhere, perhaps far away, Robert Redford might have been thinking the same thing. Faye Dunaway's life had been filled with triumphs and trials, brilliance and heartbreak. But her final words about Redford revealed a truth far deeper than fame, that sometimes the people who leave the greatest mark on us are the ones who never tried to. As the cameras faded to black, her voice lingered in the air. "He didn't change my career. He changed me." And with that, one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries finally found its peace, not in gossip or confession, but in grace, forgiveness, and the quiet beauty of being truly seen.